Well, the thing about it is,
All right. Hey, everybody. Oh, by the way, if anybody's back in the control room talking, we can't hear you. I'm Shane.
He's Shane. I'm Lex.
Welcome to it. We're going to do cheers.
Best
guys.
practices, yeah. It's always good to start a little scotch for best practice.
Yeah. That's actually now the checklist is complete. Scotch.
Yeah.
You're done.
All right. Well, and
Everything
that's the
is
webcast for the
everything
day.
is going to work.
It's going to be a better day just for that.
Yep. We're going to rip through this stuff, you guys.
There's a lot to cover.
Yep. So many questions. Want to thank Jason and Brig definitely for also throughout the days saying. Letting us know what questions keep coming in more consistently, so we can try to address this, make it a little bit more intuitive for you. All right?
Should we hit it?
Yeah, let's do it. All right, so I'm gonna go back and forth,
bouncing. Yeah, I mean
from deploy to inventory, but a lot of this is the same. Okay?
It's like kind of like a squirrel, whatever happens to hit us at the time.
Before we start out, there is a video. If JJ, I don't know how you're gonna post this link.
Let's do it on the chat.
Yeah, go ahead and post it on the chat.
Okay.
Last week we talked about what's new in Deploy 10. There was a change to allow us. This is going to allow us to have some really, really cool features in the future. But right now we are requiring that you specify console users. Mm-hmm. For most of you, this is not going to be an issue. The account you log into Windows and subsequently PDQ deploy is also your background service, so it's not going to be an issue. But if you go into preferences and you want to go to credentials, you're going to see, background service. You're going to see this new window here for users. There's a video out there explaining this, what this means. This is for those of you who have a different account. Maybe you created a service account that runs the PDQ deploy background service, and there you have 3 licenses of deploy, and you're running this on a server, and the other 3 people, or all 3 of you, log in with your own credentials. You're going to need to make sure that those other users are added as a console user. It's very simple. Watch the video. It has burned a few people. Also, customers that use a particular account that's not the background service to run PDQ deploy CLI commands. So they'll have some help desk person that runs a script that runs a CLI command, but it uses a different user. They need to add that user here. This is so that
the console actually recognize and play.
A local admin can't just log onto this computer and then be able to deploy to your whole organization. It has to be authorized. So it's a safety feature, but it also, believe it or not, it's going to really, really enable us to have some excellent features that you guys have been crying for so long.
And well, they're coming to fruition, a lot of them.
Yeah, they really are. Anyway, I just want to get that out of the way. All right, so we're going to talk about some best practices. Now, best practices is relative.
Yeah, if you've got a lot of machines versus a few machines, you're going to want to set things up a little different.
Number of machines, do you have a bunch of disparate offices that are connected by slow WAN links? These are things to consider. So Lex and I are just going to kind of go back and forth a little bit.
Just kind of hit it, yeah.
Yep. So let's go into deploy out the gate.
Let's talk about performance, right? Okay, so some things you need to know about performance, right? Obviously, things that come into play. You're going to have your network bandwidth, right? The number of machines you're deploying to, and obviously the speed of the machine the console's running on.
Speed of machines. So, and here's something that's also overlooked. You could have the fastest processor, a lot of memory, and I've got this great network. But you've got one PDQ deploy console machine, and if you're going to push out a huge package, a huge deployment to thousands of computers, you're still going through one NIC for the most part.
One NIC, okay.
And it's actually the NIC driver. The actual NIC driver can be a bottleneck. And here's where that would be. So the default settings are, if you look into performance, are 8 concurrent targets per deployment with 32 total concurrent targets. Now, if you have Pro or Enterprise mode, you can change this. Hopefully this is self-explanatory, but this means I deploy Java in one deployment to 100 computers. It's going to grab 8 of those and start chugging away. Yep. I then deploy Flash right after that to another 100 computers. It's going to grab 8 of those, up to 32. It will not go, with these settings, will not go more than 32 concurrent across all deployments. And 8.4. So obviously this number cannot be higher than this number.
Yeah. Now, you can go in there and let's say you set that at 32, okay? Again, your NIC could be a bottleneck.
Yeah, I've seen people. Well, number one, those few times I've seen somebody like add this, make 1,000 there or something like that, or 500, concurrent packages for deployment. Dude, you're just asking for trouble, especially with you're talking about trying to open up from this console 500 sessions at the same time. That's probably not wise. I've seen people go up to 16 though, 32. I think the highest I've seen that seemed to work well, but this environment was decked out. Was 64.
And again, the thing about it is the console that you're running on. You got even your drive speed at that point. Some of the things depending on where you're deploying from, your drive speed can come into play. So just be judicious on how you use this.
So if you want to change that, 16, 64 or something like that. That's fine. Go for that, or 72, or however you want to break it down. I don't care, but don't go too high. Just the whole point here is don't go too high.
Don't saturate your NIC.
By the way, you can hit reset to take you back to your defaults. All right, and you can see that those settings are saved there, so that you can import those settings if you've made a problem. There's your import, your export.
Yeah.
So 832. For those of you who have 6,000 computers, and you're on a beefed up system, go ahead and do it.
Tweak it, yeah.
So a few things. Number one, unless you're talking about deploying, you have 40 computers in your environment, do not run PDQ deploy or PDQ inventory on a 32-bit architecture, not the console machine. Please.
You're asking too much from an OS that just can't handle it.
Unless you're talking about just a handful of targets.
That's a good point.
But most of you have hundreds, and then of course many of you have thousands of targets. So 64 should be the bare minimum. Once you get to around 1,000, you're really going to want to have, I'm thinking, around 16 to 32 gigabytes of memory.
Besides, you guys are IT people, right? So whatever you get your end users, like the president of the company, whatever you get him, you should have something better because you're IT. Okay, remember this. Unless it's Sean, then Sean can have whatever he wants.
My very first IT admin job. I was working in Los Angeles, working for Argyle Television, just brand new. I didn't know anything.
How did you get the job, man? Did you just like BS the whole way?
Pretty much.
Okay.
We won't go into how I got the job.
Oh, okay.
Don't ask.
Don't ask. Don't tell. Anyway, so I got the gig, and I remember supporting a bunch of chief engineers and different television stations around the country, and we got a bunch of new computers in, and we were sending them out to these different stations. And I said to my boss, who was the vice president, "Hey, should I tell all the IT guys, hey, keep the best one for yourself?" And he said, "No. If they don't know that, screw them.
They don't deserve it. I agree.
Do not tell them." So anyway, I'm gonna leave deploy for a moment, because this is one of the biggest bottlenecks for large environments. I'd say large environments, a lot of computers.
And when we say large, it's generally over 800 is where we start seeing some performance issues. At that point.
We start seeing we have customers with 7,000, 9,000, 18,000 computers on one console. That's gnarly. That's pretty hardcore. This was kind of not designed for 18,000. But there are some things you can do.
You can do it.
There are some things you can do. Number one, the biggest impact when you're talking about a lot of computers is inventory, because inventory is so I/O.
Lots of disk reads and writes.
Deploy is taking files, copying them out to a target, and then executing from that target. So it's distributed, and then all that's coming back is just the results and the log file. Inventory, we're scanning and then bringing back all this data for all these computers, and there's a lot of disk I/O, a lot of read writes. So single greatest benefit for environments where there's several thousand computers.
SSD drive, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your database lives here. You go to your preferences, you go to database, you see the default is program data. It's on your C drive. You can get there from the program data variable, %, program data %. That is where the database, that's where the database is for each product. And if you have a lot of computers, and we've seen people with decked out processors and memory, but their scans are taking so long, guess what? You've got thousands and thousands. Can you put this on an SSD?
You should put it on an SSD.
Don't have it on SATA. We have some that have it on fairly fast
SATA,
SAS, and they're still going. We've seen so many Jenny Craig before and after the diet photos, where someone has put this on an SSD and come back and saying, well, that used to take 7 minutes, and now it took about 13 seconds.
Yeah.
So if you...
Single biggest bottleneck in inventory is going to be your disk I/O, guys. It really is.
Once you get to that point of so many
Yeah.
computers. Also, in inventory, under your network, the default setting, I already said that. The default, this is your
How
heartbeat.
often it goes out to check for machines?
We ping every, in this by default, every 300 seconds, we will ping all of the computers in your inventory database. We do 32 computers at a time. What?
It just cracks me up, man. I love the math. Here comes the math, baby.
We do 32 computers at a time for the heartbeat. And we have a 2-second timeout. That means what we're doing is sending just a simple ICMP echo request, a ping out.
Are you there? Boom.
Yeah, are you there? And we'll give it 2 seconds, 2,000 milliseconds to respond. And then if it doesn't respond, that's where you'll see it show as offline. It can also be set to online when you attempt to scan. And as long as you haven't said, don't scan offline computers, it'll attempt to scan. If it sees that there's a computer that looks offline, but it can reach it and start scanning, it'll be marked online. But ICMP is important. What I'm saying there is when you have 5,000 or 10,000 computers, 300 seconds is
You will
too
restart that
small.
process before it even finishes. So.
Too small. That's too small of a window. You're not going to be able to do the math. You're not going to be able to get all those computers in that time. Now, most computers do not take 2 seconds to return. 2 seconds is fairly long DNS name resolution wise and ICMP return wise. Doesn't matter. Once you start getting up there, you might want to increase this 600, 900, 1200.
Yeah.
That's if you want the auto heartbeat enabled, and most
There's
of you do.
so many reasons to have that enabled. So just do the math on your machines. Assume the worst, right? 2 seconds per bang. Figure out what your heartbeat should be.
A little extra overhead for those of you who have computers that. Like laptops that change IP address quite a bit, or you're kind of limited in the number of addresses you have, so you have very short DHCP leases. Basically, if you have computers that you're saying, I try to scan and it says it's going to the wrong IP address, because
Computer name mismatch.
that's where you can do this. Test multiple addresses and name resolution. For those laptops that move from building to building, DNS might actually have 3 IP addresses registered for those. So what we'll do, if you have this enabled, just take a little extra time, milliseconds, but it takes a little extra processing power.
True.
Before, when this is unchecked, we just grab the first IP address returned by DNS and try that. Now, we return that IP address. If it's offline, we will go down all the IP addresses returned by DNS until we get one that responds. Or if none of them respond, then it's offline. So that's what that's for. There's a corresponding setting.
Again, it's a great thing. Just remember, if you've got lots of laptops that are moving, it's going to take additional time.
Yep. All right. I think we covered.
Let's go back to deploy.
Okay.
So in deploy, let's talk about preferences again. Best practices for deploying stuff. Here's a best practice. There's a lot of little intricacies with it, but if you notice right there, it says copy mode, push and pull. Okay, best practice, put your repository on a file server and then change this to pull. It's going to reduce network overhead. It's going to speed up your deployments.
That's best practice.
That's best practice.
For quite a few computers.
Now, again, there are reasons not to, but general statement, that's the best way to go about it.
So the repository by default is stored here. It's in your all users or your your public desktop or your public documents folder. That's where it's stored. You can always click this little icon here and that will open up the repository. If you want to change this to a file server, I don't want to store my file. I don't want to store the install files on my console computer. I have a nice beefed up file server out there. You can change that here. You can say,
be sure you use a UNC path there. Because if you map a drive, unless you got that drive mapped everywhere exactly the same, you're going to have issues. So UNC path's the way to go.
Yeah. So maybe you want to just go to FS01- deploy or something like that. And that's where your repository is. If you change this, keep in mind, your existing repository packages do not get moved. So you would need to go into your old repository, copy those, and move them out to
There's a video on that actually on how to move those. So,
but why push and pull? I mean, what's the big deal?
Okay, so ultimately, all right, let's say let's say Office, right? That's a fairly big file, install files, right? So let's say you put that out on your file share and you say, okay, I'm going to push that out. So what happens is I'm going to deploy it to your machine. It first copies it to my console and then copies it
to the deployment. That's if you have push.
Yep.
Push means I'm pushing these install files from the console. And if those files exist off the console, you're doing 2 copies. It's pulling it down to itself and then pushing it out. So the pull basically means
you just send commands, go get it from over here.
you tell all the targets, hey, you got a deployment coming, grab those files from this file server. So the answer for best practice, if you have install files that are on a file server that are not local, you want to use pull. If they are local, yeah, you can use push at that point. It's just, and now let's say that you want to keep your repository the default setting. The packages I grab from the package library, they're going to be installed here. However, I've got a lot of custom packages, and those install files are out on the network. You can change
on a package by package basis. You can change whether it's a pull or a push.
Yep, you just open up. You can open up the particular package, and in the package properties, you can change the copy mode. You can see here we've chosen the default. Zoom in on that, JJ. You can see we've got the copy mode is default. Here you can specify I want to use the program default or hard code this to push or hard code this to pull. All right, and that's how you can get around the default from an individual
on
package.
A package by package basis. Yeah.
So the best practice, if the install
file
files,
share, pull.
Yeah.
Yep,
absolutely. Boy, we've had some customers that didn't quite realize that, and they're like, this deployment takes forever, and then they'll put some network sniffer and they'll see all the stuff coming into the console.
Yeah.
Make it pull.
Yep.
All right.
What else we got?
Do we have any? By the way, do we have any questions out there?
Yeah, we do.
All right, let's do a question.
Give it a go.
I'm excited to hear Kelly Reed. We missed him last week.
Yeah, welcome back, man.
Thank you. We have a question from Doug K., who, by the way, is the winner of the 2014 Prettiest Fish Contest. That is some delicious bass right there. When deploying to a certain group of PCs, do you recommend creating a group in inventory or setting up conditions within the package itself in deploy? Why or why not?
Okay. Hey, Doug.
Hey.
Okay, so
That's kind of a two-pronger, isn't it?
it's a multi-pronger, that's for
Multi-pronger,
sure.
okay.
Yeah. Because it really depends on the use case. Number one, for me, generally, I like to have my targets set. I like to know where I'm deploying to and have confidence. Like if I'm saying I'm going to deploy, Java 8, this is the 32-bit Java, I like the fact that I can go to deploy, choose targets from PDQ inventory, and choose the collections in the collection library for Java. There's the 32-bit.
And again, the nice thing about that is we don't have to run it on every machine. Let's say you set up a condition for Java, like a file condition or something. It doesn't have to run on the machines that don't need it.
Correct.
So you're going to limit the amount that's thrown out to the network.
Here I can just say I know I have great confidence that these computers have an old version of Java 8. And so there's my targets, or I link to that in a schedule. Confidence. I'm not going to be pushing out the same version of Java 8 to a computer or those who don't need it. But if you don't have inventory, then yes, you're going to want to use some conditions. And we talked about conditions a couple weeks ago in the introducing the file one registry conditions. Now, so generally speaking, I like the collection idea, but there are some changes to that. Let's say that you want to do an auto deployment.
Multiple packages,
or even just a schedule of multiple packages. Like I wanted to deploy the Adobe Flash All IE, Reader DC, and Java yada yada. I'm going to create a new schedule with these packages.
Now, there's no collection that contains machines that have or doesn't have. So this is where you would use the conditions
in your targets. I don't really want to go out there and say, hey, deploy to everybody who has an old All IE, because this is also going to deploy
Flash and Reader.
So in these cases, you might want to take the extra time to go in to your individual packages here and say, okay, let's create a condition. Let's create a file registry. Look at the video from a couple weeks ago. Just say if you find this file, or if you find this file with this version, et cetera, or registry value, then install or don't install, et cetera. It's
Speaking
a little
of
extra
versions,
work, but
One more thing to add, guys, use variables because it makes it so much easier. Instead of having to go into every package to change version variables, let's say you've got three different packages.
I think the variables are really important in inventory.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
that's definitely a good best practice. Just, well, since you mentioned it, we'll just jump in there. Yeah, let's say that you got to create. I mean, you notice if you look at the collection library, we use
variables.
we have to. It's almost a religious thing. You just really need to do it. If you have, let's say that you've got. Let me just go ahead and copy this real quick. We'll do 7. No, yeah, we'll do 7-zip. I'm just going to copy 7-zip, move it out. There it is right there. Move that up here so you can see. Okay, so let's say that I've got 7-zip and a new version comes out. Now I can come in here to 7-zip and say, okay, so the new version is 16.02, and then I got to change that on all reports and other collections that use this. No. You want to use a variable. That is definitely a best practice. If you have to reference a value, like a version, more than once, use a variable.
Yep.
We have videos
Again,
on that. Go ahead.
It's under preferences, variables.
Where you can just say, you can create your own naming convention if you want, but like latest 7-zip. Call it 1602 or whatever it is.
And then reference that.
And then you reference that value at open paren value, close paren. And you reference that, and all you have to do when a new version comes out is just change it in your preferences. Your collections, your reports taken care of.
Now, you guys can also use the system variables if you want.
System variables, thank you.
But we control those guys, so.
Yeah, if you want, you can see the system variables. You need enterprise mode for that. Enterprise variables, notice the custom starts with an at. The system starts with $. Yeah, you can reference these. We keep these up to date, but at the same time, you don't have control over these, so you may not be expecting something if it happens. But we have a lot of
users.
users.
Ask for, but it might not be what you're expecting.
We have a lot of users that use that.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. It really depends. You're going to have a little extra work, honestly, if you're going to focus only on conditions in your packages. Because they can take a little while to write, but you do have great control. If you don't have an inventory product, you're going to want to use conditions because, hey, instead of pushing out 7-zip on top of a computer that already has it, just do a registry condition to say, hey, if you see version 1602 or higher in the registry, don't install this.
And I'm telling you, the time you will spend building this, it's just cheaper to buy inventory, guys. And it works so much better. Hey, plug for us, huh?
Yeah, rock on, man.
All right.
Do we have another question, or should we just move on down the line? All right.
Bethany A. has a push-pull question. Is there any advantage to sharing the package repository across the network and doing the pull method even if the repository is on the deploy server?
Okay, so if the question, is there any benefit if it's on pull?
If it's on the deploy server, the console server, it's basically doing the same thing. Push, it's going to push it from the console. Pull, it'll pull from the console.
Yeah, it's if there's a benefit, it would be that, I mean, I would probably still consider doing pull, but if you do pull and you're on the, using the same repository, here, look at this. Let's say that I want to do that. This is a gotcha. Let's say that I like having, I've got this on a beefed up server. I want to do pull. You need to change the repository, even if it's in the same location, to a UNC. So you need to make it shared.
Yep.
Because right now, this public expands to users.
Yeah.
Users public. And when we copy, when you say pull, effectively we would be telling all the targets, okay, now go grab this from C colon users public. No, they're not going to have that. So even if you want to keep it on this machine, you need to change this
to a UNC path. Yep.
Yeah, to the UNC. So this, this computer is called Guinness. So you need to do something like Guinness. If you don't want to create you use the default share, et cetera, and move on down the line. So that's if you want to do pull. Is there a benefit? Not much. Now, if you're sharing the repository, that's a different part. Will you go back to that question? There's some different, no, other one. Bethany's. If you can. Thanks. Is there any advantage to sharing the package repository across the network? So if you're sharing with other consoles,
That's a different beast in and of itself, really.
yeah, if you are sharing with other consoles, you're definitely going to want to use UNC.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what they're going to need.
Again, if you're sharing the repository with other consoles, put it on file share. It's just best practice that way.
Yeah.
So then everybody can point to the one file share. So,
If they share the same repository.
That's true. That's true.
Not everybody does. A lot of people keep their own repositories, make them share, and then they can share certain packages from them. Okay, next question.
Jeff R. would like to know, should I push or pull if my files are stored locally, but the repository is listed as a UNC share?
Okay, similar question to
yeah.
Bethany. If you've got a UNC, you may as well go and say do a pull. Now, here's the thing: depending on whatever licensing you have from Microsoft, once you say pull, that really is acting like a file server,
Yeah.
right? Because now targets are connecting. If you have limits, you probably shouldn't, but if you have limits on the number of connections that a computer can take, you might have a problem. Whereas a push, I'm just instantiating all of these different connections.
Sending the copies out.
So for the most part, I would do pull if you're using a UNC, but just keep in mind that
Again, if you're storing them locally, pull push, it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there another question? All right, best practices on if you deploy retry queues.
Ooh, yeah, retries. Those can bite you a little bit.
A lot of people love
Always
this.
make sure you send out your reboots to everybody on the retry queue. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
What we recommend, if you use the retry queue, what the retry queue means, you deploy 7-zip to 100 computers. 13 of those computers are offline. At that time, those 13 computers go into a retry queue. You can configure that here in the preferences to say every hour,
Try again.
try it again to those 13 computers and do that up to 32 attempts or 72 attempts or something like that. I recommend, we recommend, do not do the retry queue globally. In other words, don't just come over and say, put offline computers in a retry queue.
Bang, yeah.
Because
that queue is going to get huge. First of all, it's going to get huge, and if you got a machine that's never online, it's going to sit there and sit there and sit there, waste your machine's time until it goes, we tried 72 times, bang.
What I would recommend, you whether you enable this or not, this retry queue interval is you need to set it here. So let's say that you want to try it every 15 minutes, which is the lowest you can go as far as retry queue interval. Let's say every 15 minutes. And we'll try it 300 times. But I'm not going to enable this. However, if I'm saying, all right, I'm going to deploy Java now out to these computers, and guess what? On this particular deployment, I don't want to use the settings for, I want to use it. I don't want to use the default. Remember, we disabled it for the default. So now I'm going to say, yes, put these computers in this deployment. And you can change, not the interval, but you can change the number of retries at the package level and at the deployment level. So I would recommend definitely.
That's where to do that, yeah.
But those of you who do use retry queue all the time, hey, you probably see quite a few computers in there.
If you want to have fun with some people, send a reboot out on a retry queue.
Go ahead and throw out another.
And our final question from Dakir B. I need to deploy a package and keep retrying for offline computers. How to ensure deployment is done only after business hours or during maintenance windows, e.g. 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. if retry is on.
Okay, so we don't, by default, we do not have
And don't attempt.
maintenance windows.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have maintenance windows. So
That won't work on a retry queue. It won't.
yeah, what you're going to need to do. Let's say that you could kind of get there. Let's say that 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Whatever your interval was set at, Dakir, I'm going to do a schedule for this package, and I'm going to have options retry queue. Yes, I'm going to have this. Put computers in the retry queue, but I'm kicking this off at 6 p.m. and it's every 15 minutes. So I'm only going to do it. And you can do the math and figure out how many iterations up until 6 a.m. And maybe we'll just say 60 for right now. So that's 15 hours. We'll do.
Are you just going to keep guessing until you get there?
11 hours and 15 minutes. There you go.
There you go.
45. this will achieve what you want. You set this deployment to go off at 6 p.m. and it's going to keep on trying, put computers in a retry queue for 11 hours and 15 minutes. All right, so it's not a native feature of this is a maintenance window. Do not deploy anything inside or out of that, but you can still kind of get
the
there.
same thing by doing this. Yeah.
Hopefully that answers your question, Doug. Here.
So we out of time?
Yeah, we are.
Wow. Okay.
We're past time.
Sorry, guys.
Hey, well, we hope it was
Yeah,
worth
hopefully.
watching at least.
Anyway, if you have any questions, let us know. Support Jason Brigg, always ready to pull more hair out of their heads.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, thanks very much for checking in. Ask your questions beforehand, during, whatever. Rock on.
Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks everyone so much for joining us today. Today's webcast winners are Bethany A. and Jeff R. If you guys will email me at webcast@adminarsenal.com, get you hooked up with some swag. That's Bethany A. and Jeff R. And up and coming, we have a end of summer webcast to kind of get you guys ready for the onslaught of people coming back from summer vacation. Get up and going. So if you'll join us for that webcast, we got that coming up soon. And if we missed your question, sorry, but we're here for you at support@adminarsenal.com.